Have you ever wondered why certain desires feel like ghosts that follow you through the corridors of your life? Why some obsessions, regrets, and projections refuse to die even when you've long since walked away from the person who awakened them? Carl Jung called this realm the Pleroma, the vast unconscious space where all opposites dissolve into each other: life and death, light and shadow, desire and detachment. In his secret text, The Seven Sermons to the Dead, Jung spoke not just to the dead of the past, but to the dead parts of the living, the parts of you that are asleep, numb, or trapped in repetitive cycles of attachment and suffering. Some women, whether they know it or not, become mirrors for these dead places in a man's psyche. When she is soft, radiant, and receptive, she speaks to his anima, the feminine image within his unconscious. But when she goes silent, when she detaches, when she walks away, she awakens something far more dangerous: his shadows, his fears, his buried longings, his spiritual hunger. The Seven Sermons to the Dead are not just mystical writings. They are psychological confrontations with power, ego, and desire. They are about what happens when the ego realizes it is not the king of the soul. And in relationships, this confrontation is often triggered by one forbidden moment, when the woman he thought he possessed chooses herself instead. This is where the game changes. The man left in silence doesn't just miss her, he obsesses. He replays memories, not because he loves her purely, but because he is forced to face the parts of himself he cannot control. Her absence becomes an altar where his ego burns. Her departure is the sermon he didn't want to hear. Most women have no idea how much power is hidden in their withdrawal, not because they are manipulating or playing games, but because masculine psychology, when left unchecked, worships control. And when that control slips away, a crisis begins. It is in this crisis that a man often meets his unconscious for the first time. Jung believed the dead were not just spirits from another realm. The dead were all the unlived parts of us, the rejected emotions, the silenced instincts, the forbidden desires we bury beneath polite smiles and social masks. When a woman walks away, especially from a man who was not ready to meet her in truth, she awakens these dead. She calls forth the echoes of his unresolved hunger. If a man has not done his shadow work, he will project onto her. He will see her as cruel, cold, mysterious, or unreachable. But what he is really seeing is the reflection of his own neglected soul. Some women walk away softly, leaving no final words. Others speak 7 words that echo louder than any speech. I choose myself over your chaos now. Those 7 words become a spiritual mirror, not because they are cruel, but because they are clear. And clarity, to the unprepared man, feels like cruelty. In the quiet aftermath of her leaving, he might try to replace her. He might chase another woman to distract himself. He might scroll endlessly through his phone, searching for validation. But beneath it all, the 7 sermons still play inside him. The ego resists them, but the soul cannot unhear them. Desire, in its purest form, is not about possession. It is about transcendence. But most men do not understand this. They want to own what should only be honored. They want to conquer what was meant to remain free. And so, the woman who walks away teaches the most forbidden lesson of all, that love is not about staying when it hurts your spirit. It's about knowing when to step back, to disappear, to let him face the abyss alone. Because the abyss is where growth happens, not in comfort, but in rupture, not in control, but in surrender. And sometimes the most loving thing a woman can do is leave a man to wrestle with his own darkness, because no one else can do that work for him. Her silence becomes his initiation. Her absence becomes his mirror. Her choice becomes his sermon. When Carl Jung wrote The 7 Sermons to the Dead, He wasn't addressing a polite audience. He was writing to the parts of the psyche that modern society prefers to ignore: the shadows, the demons, the unresolved desires. The dead he spoke to were not resting in graves. They were haunting the minds of the living. And perhaps the deepest haunting of all begins when desire turns into obsession, when love dissolves into control, and when loss becomes a gateway to inner collapse. In the silence after a woman walks away, a man does not simply miss her presence. He confronts the echo chamber of his own projections. The anima, the feminine aspect of his unconscious, has been stirred, and the ego, terrified of its own vulnerability, tries to fight this awakening by clinging harder, fantasizing stronger, replaying the same memories like a scratched vinyl stuck in a forbidden groove. But the woman who walks away is not just leaving the relationship. She is refusing to carry his projections any longer. She is stepping out of the role he unconsciously assigned to her: healer, mother, lover, muse. She is shedding the archetype he placed on her shoulders, returning it back to him for integration. This is why it hurts so much, because it's not just her absence, it's the collapse of the illusion. The fantasy dies. The mask falls away. The man is left standing in the ruins of his own projections, wondering who he is without her reflection. And that is a terrifying place to be. Yet Jung knew that this darkness was necessary. The death of the ego is not comfortable. It feels like chaos. But it is in this moment, this sacred rupture, where true transformation begins. The first sermon speaks of the Pleroma, a state where opposites dissolve, masculine and feminine merge, life and death are one. But most people resist this dissolution because it threatens their identity. A man who cannot embrace both strength and surrender will struggle when a woman chooses herself. He will see her choice not as liberation, but as betrayal. The second sermon warns of the dangers of splitting the world into binaries: good and evil, love and hate, right and wrong. The man abandoned cannot see beyond these labels. He places her in the role of villain because that is easier than facing his own unhealed wounds. He cannot yet realize that her leaving is not a punishment. It is an invitation to wholeness. The third sermon speaks of creation and the human capacity to give form to the formless. But this capacity comes with responsibility. We create stories about why people leave us. We create meanings from our suffering. And sometimes those meanings become prisons if we are not careful. When a woman walks away, a man is forced to rewrite his narrative. Was she cruel, or was she a mirror? Was she cold, or was she simply reclaiming her boundaries? The truth is not always comfortable, but it is always liberating once embraced. The fourth and fifth sermons address passion and pleasure, not the surface-level desires, but the deep, primal yearnings that hide beneath them. Jung knew that sexual attraction is never just about the body. It is about the soul's longing for union, for transcendence, for the dissolving of separateness. But when a man confuses possession with intimacy, he falls into shadow. He mistakes control for connection. And when the woman removes herself from this dynamic, his pleasure turns to pain. Not because she hurt him, but because she revealed the depth of his dependency. The sixth sermon is about becoming conscious, about facing the inner world without running from it. This is the sermon most men try to avoid. It requires brutal honesty. It demands that he sit in the silence she left behind, not as a victim, but as a student of his own projections. And the seventh sermon? It is about the spirit, about the part of us that exists beyond ego, beyond desire, beyond fear. It is about the rebirth that comes after loss, when one realizes that love cannot be owned, only honored. The woman who walks away teaches this sermon without saying a word. Her departure is the spiritual text he must now read, line by painful line. Some women will feel guilt for walking away. Others will question their worth. But the empowered woman knows this. Leaving is sometimes the most profound act of love, not for him, but for herself. And in choosing herself, she unconsciously gives him the opportunity to evolve. Whether he takes it is not her responsibility. Silence is not emptiness. It is a mirror. Absence is not cruelty. It is alchemy. And the 7 sermons echo long after she is gone, calling him to rise, to reflect, and to meet himself, perhaps for the first time. Some men never recover from a woman's silence. They carry her absence like an invisible wound, nursing it in private corners of their psyche where no one else is allowed to look. On the surface, they move on. New relationships, new distractions, new narratives. But underneath, the echo of her leaving reverberates in places he cannot fully silence. Carl Jung would call this the confrontation with the shadow, the part of the man that remains undeveloped, unconscious, and hidden is now exposed, not by her cruelty, but by her refusal to play the same role anymore. The woman who walks away withdraws her energy from his egoic structure, forcing him into confrontation with himself. And that is where the real spiritual work begins. In the Red Book, Jung wrote of visions where the dead came to his door, asking for answers. But the dead are not ghosts in the way Hollywood describes. They are the parts of us we've buried, the unresolved grief, the suppressed longing, the abandoned parts of the soul. When a woman leaves, these pieces rise to the surface. She doesn't summon them, but her departure unlocks the door to the underworld he's tried so hard to keep shut. This is why so many men oscillate between obsession and numbness after a woman leaves. One moment, they are flooded with memories. Her laugh, the curve of her shoulder in the morning light, the way her silence made him feel seen without judgment. The next moment, they become cold, detached, pretending none of it mattered. But both reactions are defenses against the same thing, the terrifying encounter with the truth of who they are without her. A man's anima, the internalized image of the feminine, often remains underdeveloped because society discourages emotional introspection in men. Instead of learning to honor his own sensitivity, he projects that sensitivity onto women, expecting them to carry it for him. She becomes the vessel for his tenderness, his vulnerability, his spiritual longing. And when she leaves, he feels robbed, not just of love, but of a part of himself he never learned to own. The sermons to the dead speak directly to this wound. Jung writes of the need to unify opposites, to hold both light and darkness without choosing sides. But the modern man, conditioned by a world of binary thinking, struggles with this paradox. He wants her to be either angel or demon, salvation or enemy. He cannot yet accept that she was both and neither, that she was merely human, reflecting back the depths of his own unconscious. And yet this pain has purpose. Some women will wonder, does he miss me? Does he regret losing me? But the deeper truth is more complex. He doesn't just miss her. He misses the version of himself he believed he was when he was with her. Her love created a reflection in which he saw his potential, his beauty, his softness. When she walks away, he doesn't just lose her, he loses access to that mirror. But here is the secret. That mirror was never truly hers to provide. It was always inside him, waiting to be discovered, without external validation. Jung's work with the 7 sermons is not about religion in the traditional sense. It's about psychological resurrection, the death of the old self, the rebirth of the soul after ego collapse. And this is exactly what happens when a man sits in the silence of her absence long enough to stop blaming her and start questioning himself. Some men will avoid this process entirely. They will find another woman to project onto, restarting the cycle, hoping to delay the confrontation with their own shadows. But the woman who chooses herself leaves behind a spiritual imprint. Her silence becomes a sermon he cannot unhear. He will remember the last words she said before the door closed. Or perhaps he will remember the words she didn't say, the ones she held back because she knew he wouldn't understand yet. Either way, the message lingers in his subconscious, calling him to become the man he pretended to be while she was still by his side. And what about you? The woman watching this, wondering if your silence matters? It does. Silence is not passive. It is active, intentional, powerful. It forces the masculine psyche to reckon with itself in a way no argument ever could. Words can be dismissed. Silence cannot. It echoes. It haunts. It transforms. The woman who knows this does not weaponize it. She wields it with grace, knowing that sometimes the deepest love is letting go, not to punish him, but to free herself from the weight of carrying his unfinished work. In doing so, she gives him the chance to finally meet the parts of himself he's been running from. Most women don't realize how deeply a man's psyche clings to unfinished stories, especially the stories written in silence, especially the chapters left open when she walks away without a dramatic goodbye, without explanation, without begging for closure. The male unconscious resists unresolved endings because it forces him to sit with his own projection rather than blame the woman for the narrative. Carl Jung's 7 Sermons to the Dead speaks in paradoxes that modern love rarely tolerates. Jung whispers to us from the depths of the psyche, the gods of old are not gone. They have moved inside you. They live in your desires, your regrets, your obsessions. And when a woman leaves, those dormant gods awaken in the man's unconscious, hungry for meaning, for reconciliation, for integration. He may not understand this intellectually, but his body knows. His soul knows. He carries her absence like a phantom limb, reaching out for her in moments of weakness, in moments of solitude, only to find empty air. This is not about romance. It is about individuation. When a woman walks away, she unknowingly becomes a catalyst for his spiritual crisis. She represents the lost anima, the inner feminine he has not yet integrated. She holds, in her leaving, a mirror to his fractured masculinity. The parts of himself he tried to find in her, his tenderness, his emotional depth, his spiritual longing, are now ghosts wandering his psychic corridors. They ask him the questions he has avoided. Who are you when no one is watching? Who are you without her love to soothe your insecurities? Who are you without her gaze to reflect your worth? Most men are not taught to answer these questions. They are taught to suppress them. So he distracts himself. He scrolls through his phone late at night, pretending the silence doesn't ache. He tells his friends he's fine, that he's moved on. He dates other women, hoping to erase the echo of the one who left. But underneath all of it, there is a hum, a quiet sermon, repeating itself in the background of his mind. You are not ready for her. That is the first forbidden realization. Not because he lacked love, but because he lacked wholeness. She wanted a partner who could hold space for her complexity, her wildness, her stillness. But he was still searching for a mother, a mirror, a savior. And when she sensed this, whether consciously or not, she chose to free herself. The woman who walks away does not do so lightly. Her leaving is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of spiritual preservation. She refuses to carry his projections anymore. She stops feeding the parts of him that avoid self-responsibility. She releases him back to himself, knowing that only solitude can force the confrontation he has delayed. But here's the paradox. Her walking away does not diminish her power. It amplifies it. Her absence becomes sacred in his mind. She becomes larger than life because she is no longer bound by everyday interactions. In his imagination, she becomes mythic. He remembers her not as she was, but as the vessel through which he glimpsed his own potential, his own shadow, his own longing. And this is why men often regret losing a woman more profoundly than they regret other failures, because she represents not just lost love, but lost self. She carries the symbolic weight of his unrealized growth, his unclaimed sensitivity, his ignored depths. Carl Jung called this process enantiodromia, the tendency of things to turn into their opposite when taken to extremes. The man who thought he had control now faces chaos. The man who believed he could replace her now faces emptiness. The man who avoided his emotions now drowns in them, in the quiet hours when no one else is around. But there is beauty in this breakdown if he chooses to see it. Some men will not. They will harden, become bitter, tell stories of how she was too much or not enough. They will miss the lesson. They will remain trapped in cycles of projection and disappointment. But the rare man, the one ready for transformation, will sit with the sermon. He will listen to the echoes in the silence she left behind. He will finally begin the work of reclaiming the parts of himself he tried to outsource to her love. And what about you? The woman watching this, wondering if you did the right thing by leaving, wondering if he understands, if he's angry, if he's thinking about you. Know this: your absence is not just absence, it is an invitation, an initiation. It asks him to meet himself at last. The second sermon is not spoken aloud, but it carves itself into his soul nonetheless. You are not entitled to her energy. This truth feels like betrayal to the male ego, especially in a world that teaches men to pursue, possess, and claim. But a woman's energy is not a commodity. It is a temple. And when she walks away, she closes the doors to that temple. Not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. Carl Jung understood this tension between desire and detachment. In 7 Sermons to the Dead, he wrote of Abraxas, the god who holds both light and darkness, creation and destruction, pleasure and pain. This is the energy she embodies when she leaves. She becomes the silent embodiment of Abraxas, teaching him that love is not ownership, and desire without self-mastery is chaos. The man who is haunted by her absence doesn't just miss her body. He misses the parts of himself he projected onto her, the healer, the comforter, the muse. Her silence forces him to confront the uncomfortable truth that he never really knew her. He knew his fantasy of her, and fantasies are easier to love than real women. So now he must wrestle with his own shadow. The parts of him that longed for validation instead of partnership. The parts of him that feared true intimacy because it requires vulnerability, not performance. He remembers the last things she said before she left. Or perhaps she said nothing at all. That too is a sermon. Silence is often the sharpest word. It echoes longer, cuts deeper, because it leaves space for interpretation. It forces him to fill in the blanks with his own guilt, his own memories, his own regrets. Some nights he replays the conversations in his mind. He recalls the warnings he ignored, the subtle ways she hinted at her growing distance. Maybe she said something like, "I need more than just promises." Or perhaps, "I can't teach you how to hold me emotionally." These are not just sentences. They are initiations into a deeper understanding of love and responsibility. But the male ego, when untrained, often dismisses such statements. He thinks she is testing him, or overreacting, or asking for too much. It's only after she's gone that he realizes she was offering him a chance to evolve. Most men don't take that chance. They try to replace her instead. They seek distraction, new conquests, shallow validation, but eventually the echo returns. In moments of solitude, it whispers, "You could have grown with her, but you chose comfort over transformation." This is the third unspoken sermon, and it lingers in his unconscious like a phantom lover. It does not let him rest easily. It reminds him that attraction without consciousness is a temporary high, but conscious connection requires inner work. Carl Jung believed that every person carries both masculine and feminine energies within them, the anima and the animus. When a man refuses to integrate his feminine energy, he projects it onto the women in his life. He expects her to carry all the softness, all the empathy, all the emotional intelligence. And when she leaves, he feels abandoned, not just by her, but by the parts of himself he has disowned. But here's the secret. Her walking away is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of his deeper work, if he's brave enough to take it on. And you, the woman listening now, need to understand this. You are not responsible for his healing. You are not his therapist, his mother, or his emotional crutch. You are his mirror. But you do not have to stand still forever reflecting his potential back to him while he refuses to evolve. Walking away is not weakness. It is an act of power. It is a declaration of self-respect. And it often teaches him more than your presence ever could. Some men will hate you for this. They will call you cold, detached, heartless. But those are the words of the uninitiated. The man who is ready for growth will thank you silently in the private chambers of his own soul because you forced him to meet himself. You created the conditions for his individuation. And yes, sometimes this pain will birth his awakening. Sometimes the woman who leaves is not the villain of his story. She is the catalyst of his becoming. The fourth sermon is not spoken in words. It is lived in solitude. When she leaves, he is left alone with himself. And this is where the real alchemy begins. In Jungian psychology, this moment is called the encounter with the shadow. The man who believed he was in control now sits in the ruins of his projections. He sees the pieces of his own broken ego scattered around him. No woman is there to pick them up. Some men will run from this confrontation. They'll distract themselves with new women, louder achievements, faster thrills. But late at night, when the dopamine fades and the masks fall away, the fourth echo returns. You don't miss me. You miss the version of yourself you thought you were when you were with me. This is the most haunting realization of all. He misses how she made him feel, powerful, wanted, needed. But that version of himself was incomplete. It was propped up by her reflection. Carl Jung taught that until a man confronts his unconscious, it will rule his life. And he will call it fate. He will blame her for leaving. He will call her unreasonable, difficult, too emotional, too independent. But what he's really facing is his own inability to hold the feminine without collapsing into fear or control. A woman's departure is not always about punishment. It is often about pattern breaking. Some women walk away not because they stopped loving him, but because they loved themselves enough to stop bleeding for someone who refuses to heal. If you are this woman, know this: your silence after leaving is sacred. It allows the man to meet his own edges without your interference. It removes the training wheels. It exposes the gaps in his emotional maturity. And for the man, this moment is a dark night of the soul. He will be tempted to blame you for his discomfort. He may resent you. But resentment is often love in disguise, love that is not ready to surrender its ego. Jung spoke of the nigredo phase in alchemy, the blackening, the dissolution of the false self. This is what happens in the aftermath of a woman's departure. The man is forced into the underworld. He will either stay there, bitter and blaming, or he will rise, humbled and transformed. There is a forbidden desire buried deep in the male psyche, a craving for a woman who sees through his persona, the woman who doesn't fall for his performance, the woman who says, "I see your wounds, but I won't mother them. I see your power, but I won't kneel to it unless you use it wisely." This woman is both muse and mirror. She doesn't play by the rules of surface attraction. She invokes his depth or she disappears. And when she disappears, her absence teaches him what her presence could not. He remembers the last 7 words she whispered, whether she spoke them out loud or sent them silently through her detachment. "I choose peace over chaos with you." 7 words that change everything. 7 words that echo in his chest long after she's gone. 7 words that force him to ask the most dangerous question a man can ask. What if I'm the source of the chaos? Not the world, not other men, not his career or his parents or his past, but his own unintegrated shadow, his own refusal to face his wounds, his own addiction to control disguised as love. Some women try to stay and fix this, but the wise woman knows sometimes the most healing thing you can do is walk away. Her absence becomes his initiation. Her silence becomes his curriculum. Her refusal to enable his unconscious patterns becomes his invitation to awaken. And for the woman, there is freedom in this knowing. You are not cold for walking away. You are not cruel for choosing peace. You are living in alignment with your feminine power when you trust that love is not martyrdom. Love is clarity. And sometimes clarity says, enough. The man who listens to the echoes will grow. The man who refuses will repeat. But either way, you have already done your part. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase. She chooses.